have been found dead in Gaza. At least that's what many of the medias would like you to believe, basically that six dead bodies just appeared in Gaza and were there just to be found by the IDF. No, that's not what happened. Six more, which I would say it's even wrong to say just six, but six more hostages have been murdered by the Palestinians ultimately. It might have been again Hamas who pulled the trigger, as it said, but I think it is Palestinians who ultimately are uh, at fault or behind this. We will talk about this more, but yeah, that's the story for today. It's a very unfortunate story. I think it was me and James who've covered the story about the Farhan al-Qadi, who was also a hostage that has been rescued by the IDF, and these six people. And in that episode, I've mentioned that I was maybe a bit too optimistic, but I was talking about we might see more hostages being rescued since that person wasn't the only one that IDF knew that was in that area. There was more hostages, but yeah, it looks like uh, they have been killed by Hamas. It wasn't a long time ago after uh, basically the bodies were examined. It's believed that basically they were killed only about 2 days ago or within a 2 day time window. Um, we'll also talk about the comments because one of the hostages was American citizen. So there was a bit of a, in a sense, unique rhetoric coming from President Biden as well as Vice President Kamala Harris. We'll talk about also them. There is also a separate story I'd just like to mention because it sort of fell through tracks, but there was also a terrorist attack in the West Bank. Three, I think IDF soldiers or security personnel were killed by a drive-by attack, by a terrorist attack. There is still a manhunt for people who did it. So if something progresses there, we might talk about that story a bit more, but I just wanted to mention it since it shouldn't be forgotten. But yeah, this the founding of the parties is definitely something that is in a sense is more people are interested in it, but we shouldn't forget that there are things happening around the area. So uh, James, welcome to the episode. How are you doing?
Well, the exact opposite feeling from when Mr. Al-Qadi was rescued, obviously. This is a horrible, horrible thing. But the fact we, in our last discussion, had the correct attitude, Daniel. Hamas equals the Palestinians equal Hamas. It's a community property here. We know that hostages were held by ordinary Palestinians in their homes. We know that some were held in the tunnels the entire time. In this case, the report is that within 42 or 72 hours, these had all been killed, shot, for example, in the back of the head, executed, execution style. So it was clearly Palestinian slash Hamas people who murdered these hostages. So the headline, instead of reading IDF finds six bodies of hostages or something, recovers bodies of hostages. No, the headline should read, Hamas, better yet, Palestinians murder six innocent hostages. And also, to understand this properly, I mean, we will get the blame laid on Israel. I guarantee it. Israel was operating about 1 meter. This is about one, mind you, this is an amazing thing. This is about 1 kilometer, from where Mr. Al-Qadi was rescued. So these hostages were being kept in the same area, And so it was the fact, some people are going to say, well, Israel shouldn't have been engaged in these efforts to rescue hostages or operate in this area at all, seeking terrorists or to rescue hostages. It was their fault for operating at all in the area. Wait a minute here. No, The fault is 100% the hostage takers. The gun has always been placed to their head. They've been demanding whatever they demand. We will kill these people unless you meet our demands. Release hostages, open the Egypt-Rafah border, etc. Let Hamas leaders survive. The demands of Hamas to continue to survive and to have that border with Egypt opened up so they can get resupplied and escape, or to not operate in Rafah, or to release terrorists who are properly arrested by Israel as criminal terrorists. Their demands are absolutely unreal. They may as well ask now for anything they want. And what? We're supposed to give it to them? Biden, yes, an American citizen here. And guess what? There's still about a half a dozen Israeli American citizens still, joint Israeli American citizens still being held hostage there right now. This is for Biden to demand more negotiations with these murderous killers is to capitulate to their demands. In other words, we can so trust these people that we can, who just murdered these people, that we should be engaged in the negotiations. Well, wait a minute. The negotiations are precisely what give them if they want greater power, kill some hostages. So what, we can get more demands. And that Biden is willing to comply with whatever. And again, my heart goes out to these families. Of course, if it's your loved one, if you're the mother of one of these hostages, you'd do anything to want to get them home. But the point is, Hamas has said there's going to be October 7th after October 7th. And the way to ensure more October 7th is to reward them. So now after they outright murder 6 innocent people, now 5 of them were taken, I understand, from the music festival, and 1 of them from a kibbutz were taken that day. Young people at that music festival taken that day. It is an ongoing threat of death. It is an ongoing piece of blackmail that's going on with Hamas. To negotiate, to pretend that they can negotiate in good faith is insane. To capitulate to their demands is to allow them to continue to perpetrate more October 7th. The price of these hostages cannot be more and more and more of this hostage taking. They will kill them like that. They are dead bodies. Can you imagine? I saw some of these people. Can you imagine the torture and rape and whatever else was going on with these poor people for almost 11 months now? And then IDF gets close to the area. They're rescuing hostages in the area, and then the Palestinians murder these people. You cannot negotiate. A, you cannot negotiate in good faith with these people. They're monsters. B, any capitulation to them is to demand that there be further hostage taking and murders of this kind of innocent people. And as for Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris, this is a cosmic failure on their part. They have blood on their hands for October 7th. It is the Harris administration that allowed billions and billions of revenue to go pouring into Iran, who has been supplying money, military, training for all of these attacks on Israel. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all those Iranian affiliates in Syria and Iraq, Hezbollah affiliates too, all these bad actors in the region. They come from Iran. They've been supplied by Iran, funded by Iran, and Biden's appeasement of Iran and allowing the shipping of billions and billions to Iran is a direct cause of this. And demanding more negotiations, demanding the ceasefire at this point, is to insist on future October 7th. So this is a cosmic policy failure and embarrassment on the part of Biden, it seems to me, and the Biden administration. Their policy has only encouraged this to happen. It helped make it happen. It helped fund it. And now they're appeasing these very murderers, which will ensure that there will be future October 7th, more innocent hostages, more rapes, mutilations, more people held in tunnels for the better part of a year. And look, there are more than 100 total hostages that we think are still out. I think it's now down because of this, down to maybe below 100. But
97.
I'm sorry?
97.
97, yeah. Because of this, we're now down to a little below 100. But there's still, but maybe a third of them are dead, it is estimated. We're not sure how many of these 97 hostages are even still alive. And I don't want to think about how monstrously, given the facts of October 7th, how monstrously they've been treated for the last 11 months in captivity is terrifying.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And I'll talk about Biden in just a second. But to not let the real person off the hook, I think Bonnie in the chat says, so it took until now for Netanyahu to see the irrationality of Hamas, that these people are not open, these are not people open to a deal. I don't think he realizes anything. And yeah, I think I've seen that in the reporting that, yeah, basically Netanyahu has said, the people who do this are not open to negotiations. And again, it almost feels like an empty statement, like what, almost like a duh. Like the whole fact that we are in this situation already implies that these are savages. These are not civilized people. Civilized people don't take hostages. Civilized people don't use rape as a psychological warfare tool. So yeah, to not let Netanyahu off the hook, he should realize. I mean, he's the one negotiating. To maybe go the other side a bit more. Yeah, we Israel did assassinate many of the top Hamas commanders, and I don't mean just kill during battle, but directly assassinate in foreign countries. That is very admirable, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't finish the job. If you don't finish the job, all of these acts are basically useless. Arafat, he's dead, right?
Yes, he has.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
been
okay.
for years now.
Arafat might die, but the resistance, in a sense, still continues. Hania might die, but if Hamas is not crushed, it doesn't mean anything.
Nothing.
Um,
Consider their demands. They want the Egyptian Rafah border open so they can get resupplied from Iran. They want terrorists released from Israeli custody so they can go on being terrorists. I mean, when you consider the kind of demands that they insist on to release these hostages, it is so perverse for people to say, make the deal for these hostages. We got to get these hostages home. Look at all the torture and torment. Look at the killing of them just like that. Consider the future, ladies and gentlemen. And if we capitulate to their demands, we are guaranteeing exactly what the Hamas leader said on, what was it, October 8th or 9th? There will be October 7th, after October 7th, after October 7th. And that is what Hamas is insisting on. So if you capitulate, you are guaranteeing more hostages being taken. I know that's a very hard conceptual thing for if you're the mother of a hostage to get your head around. But if you really want Netanyahu to do, and look what he's doing, it hasn't worked. All these negotiations through third parties in Qatar or Egypt or wherever they're doing the negotiations, look at what they produced. Nothing. The hostages are not released. They're not released. They're being murdered. And God knows what has been going on to them, at least some of them held in these tunnels for 11 months now.
We also have a Jesse, a member in the chat saying, was this retaliation or a message for saving the last hostage? That's what the mafia do. I think it's very likely that this might be some sort of a response. I think one of the reasons why the first time Israel did rescue hostages, why it was such a big deal, is that usually once Israel starts getting close to hostages, Hamas would just kill them. I think that's pretty much uh, in a sense it's a tactic by Hamas, because if they kill hostages as soon as IDF gets close, they make it so Israel is very reluctant to actually rescue the hostages and is much more likely to negotiate. It is pretty much on par with what Hamas does. Their goal is always to just maximize the damage at basically at the cost of everything. It might be Israeli hostages' lives, it might be the lives of their own people. It doesn't matter, as long as more Israelis, and I'm not even saying Jews because we know they just hate Israelis. They might be Arabs. Uh, if they are Israeli, they will still be used to basically fight against Israel. So yeah, they'll use anything to basically um, inflict as much damage on Israel. And Israel is helping them with that by negotiating, by saying to them, these tactics will work on us.
That's it. That's it. The hostage that the IDF rescued the other day, he was an Arab Israeli. Arab Israeli working security on October 7th. But these hostages, now they would have been raped, mutilated, and killed on October 7th. Why were they taken hostage? As assets. Each of these hostages is a negotiating tool. And guess what? Netanyahu and Biden have made them assets, haven't they? In negotiating with Hamas about this. Just in negotiating with Hamas, they are treating the hostages like bargaining chips. They are the ones dehumanized. In my view, negotiating for the hostages at all with these perpetrators of these monstrosities is itself to betray the hostages. In any case, each of these hostages is a valuable negotiating chip for Hamas. If the IDF is getting too close, if it looks like there might be another rescue operation, well, then their value is gone. Kill them. Hamas would rather than be dead, than be a valuable asset, maybe to get 100 times more hostages released from Israel, get their guys released, real monsters and murderers, or to get the Rafah Egypt border back open so that Iran can resupply them. That's the stuff that they're demanding. That's the only reason why these hostages are still alive, is because Hamas will be able to get concessions that will permit them to do more terrorism. That is the value to them. And my suspicion, therefore, is anytime Hamas does something like this, it's because they are in immediate fear that the hostages are about to be rescued. In my mind, that would be the only real reason they would have to just kill these people, because they are valuable bargaining chips, human bargaining chips in these monsters' minds.
And not to mention, because some people might say, well, why is it believed that any of the hostages are dead? Because it is believed, at least at this point, it might be at least a third is definitely or most likely dead. I think last time I've seen any sort of information of this, it was dozens. So it might be one third now.
It's
But the
hard to
thing is,
hold on.
Israel will negotiate even for the bodies of the hostages. When we talked about, and I'm not sure, I think it was specifically when we talked about the protest that was going on basically on the Gaza border, basically calling for the government to make a deal. One of the speakers was someone who we know that I think it was her son was already dead. So the only negotiation was for the body, and she was still basically arguing for a deal, even for a body. And I can understand the even the psychological aspect, or sort of like a spiritual, even just getting them back has a certain obviously that will still mean a lot if you can actually bury someone. But again, putting a dead basically dead people over lives of the current people still living in Israel and of future, uh you know there are babies being held in Gaza, putting this over the lives of actual people. I think it is truly um you know, like very unhealthy philosophically. Like, I think there's really something weird about such
It's
sort of a
perverse. It's upside down. It's backwards reasoning. And if you have any doubt about what Hamas's motives are here, I mean, they killed these people rather than have them be rescued by IDF. They were only alive and being kept alive so that they could be bargaining chips for demands that would insist on Hamas's continuation and guarantee more October 7th. They want that Egypt Rafah border open. They want terrorists released from Israeli custody. To even negotiate such things is to negotiate the guarantee of future October 7th. And I just have to urge all those people who really, and I understand the compassion, the families, of, the the American who was killed yesterday, his family spoke at the Democratic National Convention. His family was at Netanyahu's speech before Congress, and the whole of Congress, of course, expressed sympathy. But I would ask all of these people who are talking about negotiations, to capitulate to Hamas would be to guarantee more people be taken hostage, more victims like your loved one, more. Do you want other families? Do you want 100 times more families to suffer this? Because you've suffered this? Giving in to their demands, even respecting them as a good faith negotiating player, is itself to reward them, to help them, and their demands can only ensure that more innocent people will get killed like this.
We also have a super chat from Wes. Thank you so much. I think he also said thanks for the great work. Apparently, he couldn't send that in the super chat. That's weird, but thank you, Wes. And also super chat from Mark, who says, "How would Gold criticize the powerful helping Hamas?"
That
Uh,
sanction of the evil. That is what we are witnessing, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the central themes of Atlas Shrugged. The sanction of the evil, how the evil really survives because of the sanction that good people give it, whether it's a moral sanction, a material sanction. It is that sanction. It is the sanction of negotiating with these monsters and recognizing them as good faith negotiating partners in the first place. It is the idea of negotiating these kinds of demands with them. That is absolutely the sanction of the victim. It is Israel and the United States and their policy of saying America appeases Iran, and that sanction creates Hezbollah and Hamas. Israel negotiates with Hamas. That sanctions and continues this. It is Israel and America's official foreign policy to engage in what Ayn Rand and John Galton and Atlas Shrugged would call the sanction of the victim, the feeding of evil, the support, moral or physical, of your own destroyers. That is exactly what's going on here.
I think it was Bonnie in the chat who asked if the UN has said anything about this. So I'm on Antonio Guterres X, or Twitter, X formerly Twitter. And he did post something about this, although of course he does actually mention name of one of the hostages. Of course, he doesn't mention anyone else. He just mentioned it generally as tragic news. But this is what he said. And I think in the second half, someone took his Twitter. "I will never forget my meeting last October with the parents of Hersh, Goldberg, Pauline, and other hostage families. Today's tragic news is a devastating reminder of the need for the unconditional release of all hostages and an end to the nightmare of war in Gaza." So I don't really know. Of course, it doesn't mention Hamas at all, but saying unconditional release is very weird, because usually when it's mentioned, when US fought against fought against Japan or Germans, the unconditional release mean you surrender and we'll decide what to do with you. And I don't think that's what he's trying. That's definitely not what he's trying to say. So I'm wondering what he means by unconditional release. If it means Israel should just unconditionally, in a sense, pull out of Gaza and release all the terrorists on October 7 and completely get out, because the only other alternative is that Hamas should unconditionally surrender, which I'm welcoming that, but I don't think that's what he meant.
No, that's the absolute condition. If you mean, let me put a condition on unconditional. The requirement for it being unconditional means unconditional. Look, if Gaza, if the Hamas or the Palestinians living in Gaza really gave a crap about the humanitarian condition in Gaza right now, they would unconditionally and immediately release any living remaining hostages. And by the way, all the bodies of those who are dead. They could change this, quote, humanitarian disaster which is all their fault. The Hamas Palestinian people generally, they are responsible for the entire humanitarian condition here because, of course, international opinion would pressure Israel and America to demand an end to the war. All they would have to do is release these hostages unconditionally. They could do it tomorrow and end whatever humanitarian crisis they thought was there. But of course, from my perspective, there should be no letting up on Hamas until there's a complete unconditional surrender of Hamas. And it has been pointed out, the great Israeli leaders in the past who have observed that if Israel were to disarm tomorrow, they would be wiped out. If Hamas and the other Palestinian terrorist groups were to disarm, there would be peace. It's that simple, ladies and gentlemen.
And I would just jump into that because we had the great Mehdi Hassan basically pointing out that even if Hamas would release the hostages, the war would not end. And I'd say, yes, it wouldn't because it's too late now. Hamas is already, once the government declares a war on a free nation, it relinquishes any right to exist. Once, and that didn't happen on October 7th. That happened decades ago. And it's already decades late.
We're decades into it with Iran. We're decades into it with Hamas. We're decades into it with and Hezbollah was what founded in the 80s. We're decades into it with Hezbollah. Yeah, decades ago, we gave, what was the term we used earlier? The sanction of the victim here. That is exactly what we did. Once the attack, as Daniel points out, begins, you must eradicate the threat. You must destroy their potential to do any more harm. You must wipe out their leadership and psychologically intimidate them from ever attacking you again.
Just quickly, because I really wanted to cover this quote from President Joe Biden. Just real quick, I always forget he's still a president. I don't know. In my mind, since
lots of people are.
No, but since
there's still controversy whether he's still president.
Since he decided to like not run for re-election, I associate it with like standing down. So I just it always like flips in my mind.
Who do you think is really making the decisions?
I think he is.
President or him? I mean, he's the lamest of lame ducks is the term. The idiom we use in America is lame duck for such a president, but he is the lamest of ducks because who do you suppose really is running the show now? And has to be.
I think he is, or people who he appointed still are. So, and I don't want to give him the moral excuse. So he said,
"Oh, it's not a moral excuse."
He said earlier today in a tunnel beneath the city of Rafah, Israeli forces discovered the bodies of 6 hostages held by Hamas. Again, I would just correct him. They were not held by Hamas. They were murdered by Hamas and were left there. I am heartbroken and outraged. He added, make no mistake, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes, and we will continue to work around the clock on a deal to secure the release of the remaining hostages. And when I saw that, I thought I'm reading like an Onion article, like these people, you know, have killed our hostages, so we are going to negotiate hard with them and convince them to. I mean, it's ridiculous. Imagine if like if you are, you know, negotiating like with someone holding hostages in a bank, they shoot you're like negotiating, hey, can you release someone, and they shoot someone, and you just go, whoa, can you release them now? Like, what are you expecting? They've already shown you they do not care. And Hamas
chips, they want them dead. If they're not bargaining chips, they insist on them being dead. And yes, Mr. Biden, they weren't found. They were murdered, and murdered by Palestinians. And that's the way you have to talk about it. They were under the threat of being murdered from the outset. They were dead if you didn't capitulate to Hamas's unreasonable requests in the first place. No, Joe. So yeah, you put it so well yesterday when we first started talking, or this morning when we first started talking about it. Hamas murders more hostages, including an American and 2 innocent women. And so let's negotiate even harder with them. What? These negotiations have helped produce this. If they don't get results, they will kill these people. It is outrageous. It is perverse. It is inside out logic that can only guarantee the survival of Hamas, the encouragement of Iranian proxies, and the taking of more hostages in the future. It is insane.
Yeah, and yeah, this whole situation again, especially the last, I don't know, the last couple of days, the last weeks, it is really an upside down world. The sort of I don't know what to even call it. I think it is pretty much the lack of philosophy. That's the only way I can really explain it right now. And I'm in a sense really happy for, discovering objectivism, because there is no other way to explain it. I mean, imagine a terrorist organization showing doing basically this, or a regime, basically a government. Hamas is the representative government of Gaza, for what it's worth. Imagine a government acting like this, and the other nations are still, in a sense, accepting the legitimacy of it. And I mean, even if I would give the idea that basically Hamas does not represent Palestinians, which I'm very skeptical of, but even if I would accept that sort of belief, the United States went to war with many countries to depose their governments, basically, and trying to give the power to the people, only for those people to basically choose the same or very similar
Another
type of
dictatorship.
dictatorship. Uh,
Exactly. The
and yeah,
self-determinant. Why should Americans and Brits be fighting and dying to give people the right of self-determination if they're just going to vote themselves into some other savage dictatorship? It just doesn't make any sense, does it? We take out the Japanese government, the Nazi government, some communist governments. For what? For what? Well, in Japan and Germany's cases, we actually fought a real war. We were actually prepared to do whatever it takes, and America created now some of the best countries in the world, civilized countries in the world, allies, trading partners. It's inconceivable that Britain and America would go to war with those countries now, isn't it? And
yeah,
but what did
and I think the difference was that in the Second World War, we were not fighting the Nazi government. We were not fighting
yeah,
emperor. We were fighting Japanese. We were fighting against Japan. We were fighting against Germany. And that meant that civilians would also die and would also take responsibility for the government they elected. In Germany, Hitler got into power with elections. You could say later on that, hey, they were definitely rigged, no question about it. But for him to get to the point where he could have the power to rig the elections, he had to have considerable support, popular support. And the fact that once he started doing that, not many people rose up. That is also, at some point it is too late, and you will take responsibility for your government. That's why you have to be vigilant. That's why I always say you have to, fighting against tyranny, it's a constant battle. You always have to be vigilant against it, because I will take you responsible for your government. I will take you responsible for the actions of your government. And if you don't want it, you either have to fight against it or you have to get out.
Exactly right. Exactly right. In this case, we not only don't identify that it's the Palestinian people that Israel and America should be at war with, we don't define the ideology, the equivalent of the Nazism in this case, Islam. We don't even actually identify the Islamic roots, the ideological roots of our enemy, nor do we say that it's the people who buy this ideology, or at least there's a large segment of who do, and therefore it's the whole people, the whole country we're up against that we're fighting. So of course we don't have the same moral clarity that we had once upon a time with the Nazis. It's obvious because we're not at war with the Palestinian people like we were at war with Germany. We don't even identify the Nazism that we were at war with. And so, ladies and gentlemen, to continue the analogy, you can't let a Hitler get away with taking part of Czechoslovakia, because then he'll take hold of Czechoslovakia. Then he'll invade Poland. Then he'll invade France and Belgium. Because, that's what you do. You let him take the Sudetenland, ladies and gentlemen, and you just sort of let that go by. You are setting up him to go and invade whatever other countries he wants to invade in Europe. So you can say goodbye to the rest of Czechoslovakia, then Poland, then France, then Belgium. What else do you want to give him? Because you've just given a Hitler the green light to go forward. And that's all we're doing, is giving the evil regime in Iran and its proxies the green light to keep going.
Yeah, and there are in a sense almost ominous parallels, because again, even with Germany, you didn't have to wait until Czechoslovakia. There were many times beforehand. I mean, Germany could only, I think, have about 100,000 active duty soldiers. It couldn't even establish an air force. Sort of like drawing parallels to the representative governments in Gaza or the West Bank. But once you give up on enforcing the rules you give, then yeah, everything goes. Once Hitler knows he can break the first rule, he'll just break all of them, because he knows there will be no pushback. And similarly, once you and I think this problem started probably even before the first Intifada. Once you basically and we will actually be talking about John Oliver tomorrow, and he brings up one point where he talks about basically that it's illegal for a nation to take over parts of another nation. And I would just ask, well, what do you expect? I mean, once you have a country next to you that declares war on you and tries to kill you, and you manage to win the war, are they supposed to just like stay there and recover? I would really like to ask him, and we will be talking about that on tomorrow's reality show. But
Germany was occupied by Britain and the United States for years after the
well,
fall.
that was before United Nations was really established, so they could get away with that.
When you conquer an evil regime like the Nazis, you want to make sure that you've denazified the place before you give them back, some kind of that self-determination thing we were talking about. They weren't ready for self-determination if they could keep Hitler in power. And so Britain and the United States just camped out in Western Germany until that country got denazified. That's what happened, sir.
And that's something that didn't happen in Gaza. Basically, the way IDF did occupy wasn't, and I think probably even the United Nations was a big problem. Basically, something that works, something that was shown to work many times, basically, when a country declares war on you and you manage to force them to unconditionally surrender, you have to take over. If you have the capabilities, you have to destroy whatever the ideology was there, and then move from that point. Either let them reestablish, or I think in the case of Israel, I think it easily could have been just one state. I don't see a case for a separate Gaza, especially if they were actually peaceful. Then they might as well join with the rest of Israel, because you have Arabs living in Israel. And that was the occupation that was done right. Because again, you have to remember, Arabs were living under occupation, even under Israel, basically after the War of Independence. They were living under basically, a military occupation that they didn't have full rights. They had to, in a sense, endure that. And they were given rights after that, and now they are full citizens. And similarly, and we've seen even this done sort of relatively recently. Golan Heights were annexed. Once you annex the territory, basically means you, if if you did annex the territory and they didn't have a citizenship, that could have actually be constituted as apartheid, as many people are trying to say, when you basically exclude a certain group and you don't give them full rights. But that's not what Israel does. Israel has given citizenships to people, to people in Golan Heights, and that
Yeah.
should have been done in Gaza. That should have been done in the all of West Bank.
You know, it's so ironic because the occupation of West Germany and Japan following World War II was the best thing that ever happened to ensuring the rights of Germans and Japanese people, wasn't it? By occupying them, and so consider what an occupation of Gaza and the West Bank would mean. It would mean that UNRWA wouldn't be propagandizing the young. It would mean that we wouldn't be creating generation after generation of suicidally mystic collectivists who want to kill Jews and destroy the West. For example, just to take one example, the way UNRWA has been educating them. No, Israel should do a proper, just as America occupied Japan. Israel should do a proper occupation of the West Bank and Gaza and cleanse the area of terrorists and make sure that the enemy propagandists aren't teaching the young. Of course. And would there be a better humanitarian situation in terms of food and education and healthcare for the people in those places? Much better than they've been getting under Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, who are hell bent on one thing, destroying Israel, even if it means making their own, quote, civilians targets, fair targets, obvious targets. Again, we note the insanity and the perversity of the logic here. It's all upside down. It completely pervert because no one wants to ideologically call out the Palestinian, in fact, wider aspects of the Islamic culture today for what it is. These jihadists are mystic, violent, mystic collectivists. And we have to understand that that is an ideology as evil as Nazism was and needs to be fought in the same fashion.
Yeah, and maybe just to finish up, I was actually thinking about the idea of being pro-Israeli, and especially because there is a certain comment I often find after something I say, and I wouldn't call myself pro-Israeli. Only contextually, I'm pro-Israeli. I'm not pro-Israeli as an end in itself. I'm pro-freedom. I'm pro-free countries. I'm pro modern, just, liberal democracies to the best extent that they can be. And in this region, Israel is the only country that comes even close to that. So in the context, I'm pro-Israeli. But there's one comment, whenever I use the term West Bank, there's some people who would probably consider themselves pro-Israeli, saying I should refer to that as Judea and Samaria, which is, I think, the way Israel refers to the region, and also the way Israel's Area C, basically that part, that administrative region, is referred to as Judea and Samaria. I will not refer to it because once Israel actually takes it over, once Israel is actually consistent on it, I will start calling it Judea Samaria. But I will not give the sanction of Israel not doing what it has to do before it does. So this is called the West Bank until Israel actually does something about it. And I'll refer to it Judea and Samaria afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, my real opposition is it's not just that Israel is comparatively good, but it has flaws like every other Western liberal democracy does. Of course, they're flawed. Um, but it's also my opposition to militant Islam. It's my opposition to the biggest, worst, most horrific medieval savagery going on in this planet today, emanating from Islamic violent extremists. Now, I don't like the word extremist, but you know what I mean. They are so evil. They are so evil. But then again, it's not so much that I'm. So you say I'm pro-Israel. No, well, contextually pro-Israel. I'm in a even more urgent sense anti-jihadist. But then backing up even more, I'm even more pro-freedom, pro-reason, individualism, and freedom, because that is what's at stake here, ladies and gentlemen. The most backward, barbaric, mystic medieval culture is at odds right now with Western liberal civilization as such. And that's how we have to frame the entire discussion. We're talking about the whole, in effect, of Western liberal Western civilization versus the most savage civilization, if I can put it, to even call it a civilization in quotes, the world of militant Islam, jihadism. Those are the savages that we have to destroy in the name of our positive values: reason, individualism, civilization, freedom. Those are the stakes.
And with that, as I mentioned, tomorrow on the reality show, we will be talking about John Oliver. He made a video about the West Bank about a month ago, so we will be going through his points. And I think we also had a possible TDO. Oh, there are protests planned tomorrow, so we will probably be talking about those. And if not, you'll see soon enough what we'll be talking about. But until then, thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.
Peace.